Farming has always been one of the most important developments in human civilization. The ability to grow crops and products that can feed everyone is highly underrated, and just as humans have grown and developed, so has farming as a source of income and a lifestyle. However, farms themselves have also been home to some unexpected treasures. Some of these treasures have been actual valuable items, while others have been so hilarious that they border on the unbelievable. Join us as we take a walk down memory lane and check out some of the outright weirdest things to have ever been discovered on farmlands, as well as the implications they've had on farmers who have discovered them. A two-headed calf. To get us started, we'll take a trip back to 2015 when a cow farmer came upon a startling discovery on his ranch. On a normal April morning, Carolyn and Dwight Cruz came out to their ranch in Baker County, Florida, and stumbled upon a startling discovery. One of their cows had given birth, but the baby had two faces. The couple had been operating their family-owned ranch for decades, and they were excited to see the new addition that was set to join their family of animals. However, not even in their wildest dreams did they ever think they could find a calf with two faces sitting on their ranch. According to reports, the baby calf had two heads, each facing in opposite directions, and she also had two noses, 4 eyes, 2 ears, and 2 mouths. It is truly one of those only in Florida stories. Carolyn and Dwight then decided to name their baby calf Annabelle, and they began to care for her just like they would any of their other animals. Nevertheless, it was not so easy. Speaking with reporters about the discovery, Carolyn would explain that Annabelle had to be fed up to 4 times a day, and just as well, the calf appeared to have had some complications due to her condition. For one, Annabelle was unable to stand up for too long. Because she had two faces, she became easily disoriented and often needed to lay back down shortly after getting up. Just as well, Carolyn noticed that the baby calf's breath had become labored, and she had developed some trouble breathing. Carolyn then admitted that she wasn't sure how long that Annabelle would actually live. Apparently, Annabelle had developed a condition called polycephaly, where an embryo starts to split into twins, but then abruptly stops for some reason. A birth like Annabelle happens reportedly once in every 400 million cases, and it's considered that the longest that a cow with two faces had lived at the time was 40 days. So, little Annabelle is most likely dead right now. Barrels of oil. You know that feeling when you suddenly stumble across a discovery that seemingly changes your life, and you feel like you just struck gold? Well, this farmer may have done that, except instead of actual gold, he got the dark version. Back in 2013, Steve Jensen, a farmer who's based in North Dakota, realized that he had been smelling oil on and around his farm for many days. Concerned, he then decided to trace the origin of the smell in order to see what it was all about, but still he did not come up with much luck. Then, as he was harvesting wheat, he would discover oil bubbling up to the surface. The 56-year-old Jensen then immediately thought that he had made it big with his discovery, but sadly, he could not have been more wrong. The oil that he found was not from an undiscovered deposit. Instead, it was from a pipeline that ran under his 1,800-acre farm. The pipeline had been conveying oil from a nearby formation to a rail facility that was located a few miles from his farm, but it had suddenly burst and was causing the oil spill. The discovery ended up being the largest oil spill ever to take place on land in the United States. And unlike getting rich like the popular character from the Beverly Hillbillies, Jed Clampett, Jensen was left with a massive mess as his farm had now become polluted. All in all, about 865,000 gallons of crude oil were poured all over Jensen's farm. Tesoro Logistics, the San Antonio-based energy company that owned the pipeline, committed to repairing it and getting Jensen's land back into farming shape. A Roman soldier's helmet. Imagine walking through your farm and suddenly discovering a piece of history lying around. Well, this is the story of Eric Robinson, a farmer based in Cumbria, England. Back in May of 2010, a metal detectorist, basically a normal person with a metal detector, decided to go out hunting for treasure with his son on the land at Robinson's farm. While on their escapade, they discovered an ancient Roman helmet that appeared to have been buried underneath the farm for many generations. The helmet was made of an ornate copper alloy, described as a perfect example of Roman artistry at its zenith, although it had turned a bit green at the time that it was discovered on Robinson's farm. The color change was attributed to the same chemical reaction that had turned the Statue of Liberty a bit greenish as well. According to reports, the helmet dates back to the late 2nd or early 3rd century However, it was also noted to be a ceremonial helmet, not one that was worn into war. Nevertheless, the fact that it was found remained a pretty cool thing. Eventually, the treasure hunters and Robinson would decide to auction the helmet off, and it was sold at the popular Christie's auction house, and while Robinson had thought that it would only go for 20,000 British pounds, it ended up fetching a staggering 2.3 million. Robinson got half of the find while the treasure hunters took home the rest. It looks like old Robinson won't need to do any farming anymore. A long-eared goat. Back to animals that completely shattered the mold, we'll say hello to Simba, a baby goat with a surprising feature. Born in 2022 in Karachi, Pakistan, Simba is pretty much like any other goat, the only difference being that this little guy has really long ears. At the time of his story was reported, Simba's ears had grown to be 21 inches each. This was just with him being a little over a month old. Mohammed Hassan Nario, the baby goat's breeder, explained that Simba's ears had already been 19 inches long at the time that he was born, and as time went on, the ears continued to grow in length and did not relent. He added that he had seen that Simba would be famous from the point that he was born, and said that the baby goat had already achieved international superstardom at just 1 month. He even won a national beauty contest. Talk about everyone being all ears. He's then continued to take care of his prized goat. He told reporters that he contacted the Guinness World Records to register Simba as the greatest of all time goat, and while the record books don't have that category, or even one for the world's longest goat ears for that matter, they agreed to send a team to ascertain Simba's ear length all the same. The goat breeder has employed a staff to look after Simba around the clock, and has even gotten specially made covers in order to protect the kid's ears from infections. Gold and silver ornaments. If you think a farmer discovering an oil spill on his farmland is impressive, then we'll up the ante with a trip to India, where another person struck gold literally. In April of 2021, a realtor that's based in India was working on a piece of land that he owned when he came across a discovery that could change his life forever. The realtor was looking to level the land and convert it into a residential plot. However, while in the leveling and digging process, he suddenly struck upon an ornate pot. Curious, he decided to dig up the pot and check out its contents, and right there he came across a literal treasure trove. According to reports, the clay pot contained different antique jewelry, and altogether it's housed silver jewelry that weighs about 1.72 kilograms, as well as gold jewels weighing 187.45 grams. There was also 6.5 grams worth of rubies, everything from beads, earrings, chains, and even more. Some believe that the ornaments were most likely used to adorn ancient gods and were buried on the land centuries ago. Nevertheless, the realtor reported the discovery to the authorities, a move that he most likely wished he didn't make. Under the Indian Treasure Trove Act of 1878, the district additional collector Bhaskar took charge of the entire treasure, which meant that the realtor wasn't even allowed to keep a piece of his own discovery. Even worse, he was then barred from carrying out any additional work on the land until permission was granted. An explosive device. Although farms are designed to help solve the problems of feeding and providing sustenance to people, they can also be quite dangerous, especially those that are located in previous war-torn countries. In April of 2022, farmers would discover what they now know to be a colonial-era bomb on a farm located in Kenya. They had initially believed the bomb to be a root vegetable and decided to dig it out of the ground as part of their harvest. However, upon finally bringing the item to the surface, they weren't sure what type of root that it actually was. This discovery would cause a bit of a stir as more villagers converged upon the site. Some believed the strange discovery to be an overgrown arrowroot, while others thought that it was a missile. In hindsight, the latter group would be correct. Locals eventually contacted officers from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, who responded to the discovery and rushed to ensure the safety of everyone. Officers from the DCI would claim that the weapon was most likely a leftover bomb that was used by British forces in their conflict with the local fighters back in 1953. Fortunately for them, the bomb was safely retrieved and taken care of. Mating snakes. Now we go into one of the more risque discoveries on this list. Back in January of 2020, a Thai farmer was walking along her farm when she noticed some strange movements and sounds coming from the netting around her pond. Upon getting a closer look, the 60-year-old farmer would discover that they were two king cobras that had gotten stuck on the net. Now, normally, discovering not one but two king cobras on your farm is a pretty good sign that it's time to head out. But the brave old lady was not fazed. However, she called in local animal authorities, and they were able to arrive on the scene quickly enough to address the animals. After the snakes were separated, they were found to be male and female king cobras, and the male was up to 8 feet in length, while the female came just shy of 7 feet. As it turns out, the month was peak mating season for the cobras, so it was not uncommon for them to be found getting a little bit nasty. Snakes apparently love to be close to water sources when mating, but these guys appeared to have been a bit too randy, so much so that they got caught in a net. A mammoth's skull. Mammoths are amongst the biggest animals to have ever walked the earth. They're thought to be the forefathers of elephants, and while they went extinct before humans arrived on the scene, we've all been awed at the size of these animals. In October of 2015, however, a farmer named James Bristle from Chelsea, Michigan, came across a massive mammoth skull on his farmland that definitely sent tongues a-wagging. Bristle had been digging his soybean farm as part of maintenance with a friend when they came across something hard that seemed to have been buried in the ground. They originally thought it to be a bent fence post, but upon further examination, they discovered that it was part of a pelvis of a mammoth that lived up to 15,000 years ago. Additional digging would allow Bristle and his friend to unearth the mammoth's entire skull, complete with 2 tusks, and they also found both its shoulder blades, multiple ribs, and several vertebrae. After some careful examination, a team of paleontologists from the University of Michigan would discover that the mammoth had most likely been assassinated. They also claimed that it must have been between 40 and 50 years old at the time of its death, with a height of up to 10 feet. An ancient Chinese sword. One of the most impressive things about ancient and medieval weaponry is that they always tend to stand the test of time regardless of where they're found. So, if most of these weapons end up being lost in fields, they could easily stay there for centuries and hold their own. Back in 2015, a Chinese farmer would be patrolling his field located in Qinghao County in Chongqing, and there he found a rusty sword that appeared to have been lost to time. He noticed that the sword had lost its head and handle, although its blade had 3 mysterious characters written upon it. After sharpening the blade and getting it back into top shape, he found that 2 of the characters translated to sword and dragon. Now, it might not be as fascinating as a chest full of gold, but the discovery was pretty cool nonetheless. Even more interesting is the fact that he held on to the sword and now uses it as a kitchen knife. The Lenape Stone. In the spring of 1872, Bernard Hansel, a farmer plowing his father's farm just outside of Doylestown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, came across a stone lying on the surface of the ground. He picked the stone up and found that it appeared to be a larger piece of the broken Gorget stone. As documented history has found, Hansel cleaned the stone and found strange lines and carvings that showed an elephant-looking animal. The story claims that he had held the stone for several days and eventually locked it up in a chest where he kept other relics that he had found. The stone remained there until 1881, when Hansel sold it to Mr. Henry Paxton, a little boy who was collecting artifacts. A few months later, Hansel reported finding the second piece of the stone in the same field where he had found the first. Once the 2 pieces were joined and then examined, they were said to depict a tribe of Native Americans who were hunting a woolly mammoth. Now, to be fair, there has been a lot of doubt as to the authenticity of the Lenape stone. This is primarily because mammoths became extinct in North America about 10,000 years ago. However, other archaeological discoveries show that the region in question has only been inhabited for less than 2,000 years. The fact that no one could attest to Hansel's discoveries besides Hansel himself, and perhaps Paxton, means that no one can corroborate what the little farm boy had found. Nevertheless, the Lenape stone has been an important piece of history, and the fact that it was allegedly found on a farm makes it even more interesting. Piles of money. They say that money does not grow on trees. Well, what if it sprouts out of the ground? When it comes to completely life-changing discoveries, it's difficult to see anyone who tops Jose Mariana Cartolos, a 65-year-old Colombian farmer. He had gotten about $3,000 in grant money from the Colombian government in order to start a palm oil plantation on a piece of land that his family had owned for at least 2 centuries. While digging the land to set up an irrigation system, however, he would discover a huge lot just under his feet. Following excavation, he discovered several massive blue containers, and when he opened the containers up, he found mountains of cash. But how much? About $600 million. That's right, Cartolos got a $3,000 grant to dig up his farm and found $600 million just hidden in the land. Reports would suggest that the loot must have belonged to Pablo Escobar, the infamous drug kingpin who was one of the world's richest men at his height. Escobar was always on the run and had stashes of cash buried in different places in order to ensure that he didn't become stranded. Now, talk about rich people and their problems, right? No one really knows how much Escobar had stashed around or even where the money's located, but if you're ever in Colombia, perhaps you should start a farm because you never know what you might find. A human-pig hybrid baby. We'll now head to China to find one of the most disturbing discoveries on our list. In 2018, a video made the rounds all over the internet that showed a pig that appeared to have given birth to a human-pig hybrid baby. The video was said to have originated from Guangdong province back in June of 2018, and it showed a farmer holding up the disturbing new baby to the camera as he speaks. The baby pig could be seen with what appeared to be a human face and an underdeveloped body. Its mouth was slightly open while its tongue was stretched out, and the baby appeared to be gasping for air, but it doesn't make a sound. According to reports, the pig died about 2 days later, and that's probably fitting since no one would want to eat or even own a hybrid human-pig baby. Interestingly, this isn't the only story of such an occurrence taking place. Just a year earlier, another video went viral as it showed a pig baby with what appeared to be a human face and even a penis-like structure coming out of its forehead. When the story became a national hit, many people would reportedly contact the pig's owner to offer to buy it. Sadly, like the first little piggy, this one also died a few hours after being born as it rejected food. Stories of hybrid babies have continued to make the rounds in recent times. Some believe that these creatures are some sort of proof of the supernatural, while scientists have blamed their advent on extreme agricultural and breeding practices. Whatever the case may be, it is definitely an unsettling sight. A sunken ship. When it comes to size, it's difficult to find a farmland discovery that comes even close to the Great White Arabia. Found on a farm in Kansas City, Missouri, this ship startled pretty much everyone who found it, not because it was a ship, but because it was found in a cornfield. So, time for a little backstory. The Great White Arabia was a steamboat that was traveling over the Missouri River on September 5th of 1856. It would reportedly strike a tree trunk and was engorged with water, causing its passengers to flee without their cargo. Luckily, there were no casualties in the accident, except for a mule. However, the boat still sank with over 200 tons of cargo on board. Nevertheless, the Great White Arabia was untraceable for over a century, until 1988 when this changed after David Hawley, a local explorer, heard about the sinking and decided to trace the course of the Missouri River at the time when it sank. Hawley and his team eventually found the Great White Arabia in a cornfield. So how did a ship sink under massive water and end up in a cornfield? Well, the answer lies within the United States Army Corps of Engineers. In the later half of the 19th century, the Engineer Corps embarked on a different project to forcibly alter the Missouri River's shape. Their goal was to bring the river's banks closer together, thus narrowing its width and allowing boats to pass much faster. One such area where they worked was on the site of the Great White Arabia's crash, even though they didn't seem to know it at the time. As the Missouri River's course was altered decades later, the steamboat appeared to have been perfectly preserved. Hawley's discovery yielded a massive collection of well-preserved artifacts, and the team discovered over 200 tons of items, which included shoes, champagne bottles, and much, much more. All of these are now on display at the Arabia Steamboat Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. Roman coins. Still on discoveries that could one day be worth a fortune, David Crisp, a hobby metal detectorist from Wiltshire, came across a massive trove of Roman coins while scanning a farm in 2010. The discovery, which was the largest single trove of treasure found in Britain at the time, was made on farmlands that were close to Somerset. All in all, Crisp found a total of 52,500 silver and bronze coins, all dating back to at least the 3rd century. They were said to be the largest ever set of coins minted by Carausius, a self-proclaimed emperor who only lasted 7 years on the Roman throne before he was murdered by the man that he chose as his finance minister. These coins were so old that it reportedly took conservation staff at the British Museum about a month to give them all a preliminary wash, which would have prevented them from sticking together as the soil dried out. Compiling the first rough catalog took the staff another 3 months. To date, it's still a mystery how these coins made it all the way from Rome to Somerset. However, archaeologists believe that it could have been the life savings of a local community in Rome back in the day. As of now, their true monetary value has not been determined. A mysterious cave. They say that art imitates life, or something like that, and akin to the popular Alice of Wonderland movie, a Polish farmer came upon a massive discovery while working on his land in 2021, a hidden cave. In March of that year, Adam Bryzek, a Polish farmer, was roaming his land when he came upon what appeared to have been a massive hole. The hole had widened over time, ultimately collapsing, but the startled farmer soon began digging and found an opening that led down to 10 meters underground. He then reported his findings to the authorities, and since then, his farmland has played host to a different set of archaeologists from Lublin, one of Poland's major cities. The underground space appeared to be a solutional cave, meaning that it was forced by the dissolution of bedrock and groundwater. A guardian of monuments in the county claims that the cave dates back to a period that's between 2.58 million and 11,700 years ago. However, even though the cave appeared to have been formed naturally, researchers also pointed out that it had been visited by humans, most likely to extract some stone. The cave's walls did show marks of extraction tools, showing that it had most likely been an excavation site at some point. From a historically significant stone to cold, hard cash, farming discoveries are definitely fun to think about. But what do you think? Would you report finding real money under the ground on your farm? And which of these discoveries were real or fake? Be sure to let me know all about it in the comments down below.